Hey guys, the first thing you're going to want to do is open up the two charts that I have listed here, the fatal flaws and causes chart and the irony and foreshadowing charts. You're going to go ahead and watch the video as I kind of go over what you're going to fill in, and then you need to actually fill it in on your own document as well. The reason for these charts is to help us track a few things. The first one, the fatal flaws and causes, those are a series of kind of flaws that some of the characters in Romeo and Juliet have that lead to the downfall. So a series of hamartias. And so we want to track those. The other thing that we're tracking is just kind of instances of irony and then instances of foreshadowing. Just so you know, there will be some sort of essay or writing assignment at the end of reading Romeo and Juliet, and these charts may become very, very helpful to you in that essay. Okay, I won't tell you which chart, and I won't tell you whether or not that's even true, but they will be. Okay, so please make sure that you fill those in. Let's get started. All right, let's start with the flaws or causes chart. Notice in the directions it says, note any evidence from the play of cause and effect relationships with the following behaviors among the characters. So you'll see this is actually a two-page chart here. There are a total of 6 flaws that I want you to kind of keep track of and be aware of. And so I'm going to help you with that, especially as we get started, and then you guys may have to kind of track it after that on your own. Notice when I track it, it says to cite the act, scene, and line numbers. Don't worry about the line numbers. I'm just going to give you the act and the scene, okay? If you want to include line numbers, go for it, but I'm just going to give you the act and the scene, okay? You'll also notice that as I do this, I highlight in different colors. For whether it's an act or prologue or which act it is. The reason I do that is because you're going to have a lot of evidence there, and it will help you keep track of that a lot easier, more visually if you do that. You don't have to, but it's up to you. Okay, so let's start with disobedience. This is a flaw that leads to the downfall. So it's essentially a hamartia. Okay. So first, the initial point of disobedience is that the servants initiate a fight in Verona, in the streets of Verona. That was an Act 1, Scene 1. And so, granted, the prince hadn't made his decree yet that they can't, but come on, you're not supposed to start a fight in the middle of the street. So let's just go with that, okay? We can leave impatience blank for now. I'm sure there's probably some examples already, but I'm not going to have you mark them. For chance and fate, there are a lot. How about in the initial prologue, they start out by describing Romeo and Juliet as star-crossed, establishing their love and their relationship as something that is just not destined to be, okay? In Act 1, Scene 2, remember that it just by chance, Romeo just happens to bump into the servant who can't read, and he helps him read the Capulet party invitation. Without just by chance bumping into that servant, he may not have even known about the Capulet party. Certainly was not invited as a Montague. In Act 1, Scene 4, remember Romeo says that my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars. That he has this bad feeling about what's going to happen tonight at this party. And so he even has this kind of sense that something is at work that's far above me, that is out of my control, and I can't, I just can't do anything about it. In Act 1, Scene 5, Romeo and Juliet just happen to fall in love with each other without even knowing each other's names. They fall in love with the exact people that they should not be with, right? They are enemies, okay? They are the son and daughter of rival families. So the fact that they just happen to fall in love with each other, the one other person of the party that they shouldn't be with, that's fate, that's chance, right? Okay, on the second page, let's go with anger. So when the fight does break out in Act 1, Scene 1, the prince is angered by the fight, and he ends up threatening death, right, to those who reignite that fight. In Scene 5, Tybalt is angered by Romeo's presence at the party, and he vows not to let it go. So both of these instances, the prince and Tybalt, their anger resulted in kind of really serious threats. For pride, it is a point of pride. It is a matter of pride that this long-standing feud between the families is even in existence, right? Could they let it go? Sure. Okay, could they just stop killing one another, fighting one another? Absolutely. But they don't, and I think that a lot of that has to do with their sense of pride. And so we see that initially in the prologue. In scene 5, once again, connected to Tybalt's anger, Tybalt will not endure Romeo at the party. And if you remember, he was actually described twice as, or at least compared to a rooster, right? A proud rooster. As a princox, and they said, you'll set a cock-a-hoop. So both are related to kind of the proud rooster. For secrecy, this is kind of a weird one, but Romeo and Juliet didn't even know each other's names when they fell in love. Okay, their names were kept secret from one another. That was in Act 1, Scene 5. Okay, so again, that's the causes chart for now with Act 1 and what we know. We'll fill this in some more a little bit later. Now let's switch over to the irony and foreshadowing chart. And I got a few for you there. I don't have anything from the prologue, although technically the prologue gives away the whole ending. But let's start with irony. In both Act 1, in Act 1, Scene 1, Romeo insists that he will not love anyone but Rosaline, but then in Scene 5, he instantly falls in love with Juliet. So that's an example of situational irony, because he says, oh, I could never love anyone but Rosaline. Well, dude, you actually did right away the second you saw Juliet. So that would be some irony there. For foreshadowing, there's a lot of examples I could have put here. I limited my Act 1 examples of foreshadowing to just 4. Starting with the Queen Mab monologue. Remember that the whole point of the monologue is that sweet dreams can turn to nightmares. So that was Act 1, Scene 4. And then right after that, Romeo says, my mind misgives some consequence yet hanging in the stars. So yeah, some consequence hanging in the stars, it's a bad one. And so we know that ultimately does happen. In Scene 5, Tybalt, remember, he says this intrusion now seeming sweet will turn to bitter gall, right? It's going to turn bad, okay? And so Tybalt actually, he probably meant that as like, hey, Romeo may think that he's here just for fun or whatever, but this is not going to go well because I will not endure it. However, the truth is the intrusion that Romeo makes upon the party, it seems sweet at the moment because he falls in love with Juliet, but ultimately we know that it does turn sour. It does go badly. And then at the end of Scene 5, remember Juliet says, oh, if he's married, my grave is like to be my wedding bed. Meaning like, well, you know what she means. And ultimately that is kind of true. The union of Romeo and Juliet does lead her to her grave. And so they are one and the same in a lot of ways.